In this video, we're going to be looking at the definition of I. And the definition of I, the imaginary number I, is defined as I is equal to the square root of negative 1, and I squared is equal to negative 1. So here in problem 1, we have write each radical in terms of I. In A, we have the square root of negative 31. And remember, we can split inside the radical and write it as the square root of negative 1 times 31 and write it as two radicals. So the square root of negative 1 is equal to I, and then we have the square root of 31 remaining. In B, we have the square root of negative 81, and I can write that as I times the square root of 81, and the square root of 81 is equal to 9. So this is equal to 9I. In C, we have negative the square root of negative 16. And we can write that as negative I, because this negative comes from our negative on the outside of the radical. And now the I comes from the square root of negative 1, and then we're left with the square root of 16. And the square root of 16 is equal to 4, so this is equal to negative 4I. In D, we have the square root of negative 75, and we can write that as I times the square root of 75. And 75 can be written as 25 times 3. So we have I times the square root of 25 times 3. And the square root of 25 is equal to 5. So this is equal to 5I times the square root of 3. And they give us some rules here on multiplying and dividing square roots, and we'll see these used in the examples below. So we have, in number 2, it wants us to simplify, and we have the square root of negative 9 times the square root of negative 4, and we can write this as I times the square root of 9 times I times the square root of 4, which is equal to the square root of 9 is equal to 3, so we have 3I times the square root of 4 is equal to 2, so 2I, and we can write this as 6I squared, which is also equal to 6 times negative 1, because I squared is equal to negative 1, and this is equal to negative 6. In B, we have the square root of negative 9 times negative 4, and they ask, how is this expression different from in part A? This expression is different because there's a single radical. So here we have the square root of negative 9 times negative 4, and when we multiply negative 9 times negative 4, we get 36. So we have the square root of 36, which is equal to 6. In C, we have the square root of negative 9 divided by 4. So the first thing that I want to do is take the square root of negative 1 out and write it as I. So I have I times the square root of 9 divided by 4. And the square root of 9 divided by 4 is equal to 3 over 2. So we have 3 over 2 times I. In D, we have the square root of negative 5 squared. So I can write this as I times the square root of 5, all squared, which is equal to I squared. And the square root of 5 squared is equal to 5. And this is equal to 5 times negative 1, which is equal to negative 5. And in 3, it says, based on the above, is the following statement true or false? The product and quotient rules, the square root of a times the square root of b is equal to the square root of a times b, and the square root of a divided by the square root of b is equal to the square root of a divided by b apply when the square root of a and the square root of b are real numbers. And this is true. And that's our video on the definition of I.